Oh, my title needs to be locus of control. Save that. All right. So I just wanted to talk briefly and figure out some thoughts that I had on this. I just re I learned this when I was in college as well. Locus of control. Let's put my webcam on, huh? I can make myself a little bit bigger maybe here. And put myself down here. All right. So locus of control. So the concept is just that um, if you believe that you are in control of your life, you take responsibility for the outcomes of what happens to you, versus if you're externally, you know, you have a locus that's external to yourself, where the control of the thing that's upon yourself is outside of yourself, then you blame other people for the outcomes that happen to you, or you don't take responsibility for things, um, or the outcomes that happen to you. There's It's confusing because, like no one is fully internal or external. There's always different things where it's like you can say, "Oh, I did that. That was my fault," etc. But other times you might be like, "Wait a minute. I don't take responsibility for this particular thing. My mom taught me to cook the food this way, and someone's telling me I'm using the, pineapples on the pizza wrong and they shouldn't be done that way because it could be better this way." And it's like maybe that whole argument just boils down to different people understanding like flavor in different ways. And are you responsible for causing someone else to not enjoy eating the food that you cooked, when you did your best with what you were taught? And I think about this in life a lot, right? Like, do we need to take responsibility for anything? If we're in a deterministic universe, like we're completely out of control. Like everything is known. If you could calculate the universe entirely, know exactly where the particles are bouncing, then you really have no choice and no freedom, and you have no control at all, because anything you're going to do in the future is already can be pre-calculated, because all the neurons in your brains are going to bounce around in a predictable manner. um, but I think we do get to choose, like, I want to meditate today and think about the choices I'm going to be making today that might affect other people, might affect tomorrow. A lot of people are completely ignorant of how much control they have over other people. I think that this is actually a naive understanding. Like, the locus of control is not wide enough. It should be expanded, because this is still focused on the individual. Like the person who made this was a very internally focused individual, because he's only thinking about himself. What about society? How much do your actions control the society you live in? If you're a streamer online and you're putting ideas out into the universe, you might have some amount of control over your followers that are watching you. Um, with social media becoming so prevalent in society today versus when this concept was created, I think that the individual's ability to control their society is much greater than it was in the past. Although, you could say that, someone like Hitler controlled society quite a lot through his promotion of certain content and, banning and burning of other content like the books in society that are, similar to how Trump is like making certain things banned from being able to be taught in schools, and yet promoting like Christianity being something that needs to be taught in school or allowed to be taught in school over any other religion. This is like kind of a dangerous thing to put that to exert your own personal beliefs into others. And in some ways, he thinks that he's responsible for anything good that happens, and then anyone else is responsible for anything bad that happens. So Trump is an interesting case study for this concept of locus of control, because I don't think that it's either internal or external, but more it's an awareness of truth, an awareness of flow. So this locus of control can flow, your perspective can shift, I've previously made videos about how we're all wearing like sunglasses that are tinting the reality that we're seeing with different colors, and provably anyone with an Android phone is having some blue taken out of their stuff at night because they have a default blue light filter and things like this. And your childhood is kind of like that pre-programmed Android phone where it's pre-programming you to see reality with different colors. It's really sad to me to see some of these Instagram stories with like children in Israel believing in the goodness of killing Palestinian people, as like it's clear that they're given like a hateful color of lens that they're looking through, and that has been programmed into them, and they can't really avoid seeing the world in that kind of shade, that kind of color. And not all of them, right? But just a good majority of them have been exposed to propaganda that makes them think of non-Jewish people as, animals that are free to be slaughtered, and God won't, not let them into heaven because of those murders, as long as they don't murder other Jewish people. There's lots of weird stuff in the Talmud about this. So these books, like these religious books, are good to consider in terms of like this locus of control. Like when you expose yourself to certain thoughts, you're allowing some other source to like take control of yourself because of neurolinguistics programming. This is something to think about also in relation to this. So Dunning-Kruger is basically like you learn a little bit and now you think that you know a lot, but you're wrong. And then you learn a little bit more and you realize, oh God, I'm really stupid. I actually don't know anything, because you've learned enough to see these other people that actually know a lot, and you compare yourself to them. Whereas when you're in this area of the peak, you had not yet seen this level of education. You didn't know it existed. You didn't know what you didn't know. But once you learn what you don't know, then you're like, oh my God, there's so much I still need to learn. I'm an idiot. And so maybe this is called the valley of despair. So you actually think that you know less than you know, right? Um, these, this is confidence versus competence. I think these axes are actually incorrect. I mean, this is how it was taught, but it should be like objective confidence or objective competence versus perception of self competence or perception of your own competence. So you perceive yourself to be less competent than you actually are in the valley of despair. So you're better than these people who perceive themselves to be better than everyone, but you perceive yourself as being less than them. So sometimes you let these people like kind of bully you around in academia. Uh, there's this girl, for example, this is a great example. There's like this 16-year-old who thinks she discovered like some quantum effects with basically just she was talking to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT hallucinated some stuff that she wrote a science paper, you know, about, and is claiming to be the one that has discovered all these new quantum things that are completely just hallucinated AI stuff that hasn't done any experiments or research, hasn't been exposed to all the existing knowledge out there in any way to really understand why what she's saying isn't correct. And even these people that are, like only a PhD would be able to prove what she's saying wrong. So there's only maybe like 5 to 10 people on the planet that could like show why she's incorrect. So there's tons of people like VCs and investors and stuff, maybe like a new company that's putting out a new technology that might invest in this Mount Stupid startup person who's actually not educated, but it appears like they are, and they're talking with confidence as if they discovered something new, or you know are much more intelligent than everyone else, and where they really should be funding these people that are underestimating their own abilities. They're more likely to be successful, the people that are in the valley of despair, because they will get to this slope of enlightenment before this person will on their journey. Um, and so this person's going to have a crash out. That girl that did like the quantum AI stuff, she's going to crash out as soon as like one of those PhDs releases a paper and like shows that she just did all this AI stuff. And then for some period of time, she'll either educate herself or won't, and she might just get stuck in this valley of despair forever, right? She might not get motivated. It's really hard to motivate yourself to continue in a field. I think, um, a friend of mine dropped out of computer science because they got to this valley of despair. Like at first they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so powerful. I can use computer programming to control the world." And then they start taking tests and they start not performing as well on the tests as like their peers. And they're like, "Wait a minute, it's actually hard. I'm not a genius. Oh my God, I want to be a genius. Okay, I need to drop out of computer science because I'm not a genius in that field." But it's the reality is just that the field is actually kind of difficult and takes a lot of time. And yeah, it's kind of weird. Like you almost have to get into it at a young enough age. There are people that can like play chess blind because they were looking at a chessboard at a young enough age to like see an 8 by 8 grid of squares in their brain. And some people learn math at a young enough age that they can like visualize the graph, like y equals x. Almost anyone can visualize that has learned any amount of algebra. It's just a line on the axis. But you try to do, okay, what does a y equals x squared look like? And like, more complex functions. And what about a three-dimensional graph? What if you did like z equals x plus y? I can almost visualize z equals x plus y, but when you start doing any kind of exponentials in a three-dimensional plane, and then you want to like cut this field with some other thing, like what if I want to cut this 3D space with the plane x equals y? So you've got like this huge slice that goes through the graph. I can visualize that plane x equals y, or sorry, like z equals x and z equals y, right? Like these lines that you can form into a plane. And like, but more complex stuff like z equals x to the y or z equals y to the x, and like comparing those graphs together and seeing, what values of x and y would you need to make x to the y less than y to the x? That sort of question, like when is x to the y less than y to the x? And if you could visualize this 3D plane, it's really obvious to you. So I have a friend who's like really good at math, and it's kind of like people who can visualize chessboards. He can just see that 3D graph in his brain. He doesn't have to think about it. His brain just does it. And my brain does not do that for those things, but my brain does do it for computer programs. I can see very complex lines of code. I can really quickly say, okay, I have a function that does this, I have a function that does this. I'm going to have to call them in this order. I can understand intuitively when there's like multi-threading issues, some database stuff. I started working with databases very young, so I can understand like the concept of atomicity and other issues that are important and why they're important. Whereas, it takes a lot more thinking for other people once you're older to learn those things. Um, this locus of control thing is really interesting though. So I've recently created this app called wayvote.org. Um, it's a browser plugin so that when I go to Reddit, so for example, I'll load Reddit, and you see immediately all the promoted posts just disappeared. So first of all, I'm removing advertisements, and then I'm reordering everything with a custom ranking. So the order that originally Reddit had given me all this content, I cache it all locally, and then I tell Reddit, hey, give me more content, give me more content, give me more content, as if I scrolled down really, really far. And then I can keep all that content in local storage and then reorder it based on my own ranking algorithms. And the concept is that I can maybe, like if you upvote something and you have an IQ that's one standard deviation greater than average, then I can give your upvote a weighting of maybe worth 10 upvotes of someone who has average standard, IQ. And that way I can say I only want to see posts that people with high IQ have upvoted. And also it counts their downvotes the same way. So if someone of high IQ downvotes something, that they would give like minus 10 votes to that thing. Similarly, I could put other metrics in here. I could create my own custom metric so that I can then interact with the internet in a way that I'm in control of, rather than Reddit being in control of this. So thinking about locus of control and how it relates to that is actually really interesting, because it's like, I think that it's a good thing to take responsibility for your actions and to take responsibility for the influences you're allowing into your own life. So for example, like Mormons don't let their children watch, R-rated movies or drink coffee or alcohol. Like there's certain things that that religion might be against. And so they allow their religion to have this control over their life. And in some ways that's like a good template for having good outcomes, right? Um, we're all following templates, whether we're aware of them or not. We're allowing certain influences into our life and pushing other influences out of our life. So we have to be very wise as much as we can, even though that wisdom is not easy to cultivate. It's difficult to know what's real, especially today with, Sora 2 out there. Um, it's difficult to know if there actually is a need for a National Guard in Portland or not. The Oregon governor says no, Portland governor, mayor, whatever. So they're like, no, we don't want you here. They're trying to block Trump from sending troops in. And Trump is trying to send troops in because there's rich people that are making money off of putting people in prison that are undocumented. But now it's a problem because there's money involved in trying to put even people who are citizens in jail because they make money. So if you don't carry your passport on you, you could be put in jail and make some rich guy more rich. It's a problem that our society has been given, that our government has been given this kind of control over the individual. Um, Due process has kind of been destroyed in America a bit. And so I think that America was created kind of with some of the psychology in mind to give, like Burning Man has this idea of like radical self-reliance. Uh, Radical self-reliance, basically like you don't blame anyone else for anything that happens bad to you. Like you're responsible to be prepared and bring everything to the desert that you need to survive in the desert. Um, you know, if you take any drugs, it's, your fault. You can't just say, "Oh, I didn't know what I was taking." Well, it was your fault not to educate yourself, to know what you were taking, not to trust other people, um, to do due diligence on knowing where they source their drugs and what was put in those drugs, and if those individuals are trustworthy or not. And it's not, at some level we're all giving up control, and this kind of radical self-reliance is an impossibility, but it's a concept. Like almost everywhere in the world, you drink water coming out of your sink, and you're getting certain amounts of nuclear material that are going to stay in your system forever. Like your body can't get rid of those chemicals. And so, yeah, you want to have maybe a filtration system that doesn't allow those chemicals into the water that you're putting in your body. And most people don't, spend money on this because it takes time to do this kind of reverse osmosis water preparation. And it's like how many rabbit holes are you willing to go down to really have that much control over your body, over your mind, and over your spirit? There's so much effort you could put in any one of those directions, and you don't have that much time. You could spend your whole life devoted to one of those branches and spend, care entirely about your spirit. Or you could be like these, models that spend almost entirely all of their energy and time dieting and eating healthy to worry about their body and keep their body looking as young as possible and taking the right medications and everything. But they would then be neglecting their spirit and their mind. These diets are provably destroying their brain cells, and they won't be as intelligent as they would have been had they not been caring about their body over their mind. So we're always giving up control, and any axis that we seek to gain control over, we're giving up some other axis of control, and we're this Dunning-Kruger effect where we're never actually understanding ourselves accurately. Right? There's times at which we do understand our own competence, but that's by chance, it's by luck, right? We're probably always either more competent than we think we are or less competent than we think we are. And understanding that objective reality and seeing how it applies to this locus of control is really insightful. You always think that you have a certain amount of control, but it's an illusion. Um, I'm thinking back to my childhood when I used to win. I was really cocky in Magic the Gathering tournaments when I used to win tournaments versus these people that were much older than me, and they would say, "You're all luck, Seth, and luck runs out." This guy said this to me when I won this tournament. Um, and I was just smart enough to make a deck at that time that had many different opportunities for luck. There's this streamer named Steel Mage that many people say is very, very lucky, but I think he's very, oh no, Steel Mage. He's very good at doing the same thing when he plays different video games, where he can see all the ways he can maximize his luck.
My prize.
So he's typically luckier than other people, but that's because he's purposely choosing paths where opportunities to get lucky are more prevalent than the other paths, right? It's kind of like I hate lottery tickets. Everyone thinks about lottery tickets. But like you could think about it, you're on a hike, right? And this trail is going to have 10 other different paths along it, whereas this other trail you take, you're going to be on that for the next 3 miles, and there's no other paths on that trail. So if it rains and it gets muddy, the likelihood that you can walk under a tree is probably greater on the path that has more trails off of it, and wait out the rain and not get wet, versus the other trail where if it rains, you're probably getting wet because there's no other way to go on that trail. You can't even turn around maybe and take a shorter path down the hill or something like this, So he has a better locus of control in taking responsibility for his choices, which is good because then he can say, hey, these are the choices I have. I'm going to make the best choice that gives me not only the right influence that I want over myself, but it gives me more choices in the future. And he also is aware enough to call himself stupid and be like, there's other people out there that are smarter than me. He gets carried by chat a lot of times. He'll ask chat for questions, but simultaneously he's a little bit opposed because he does have times where he thinks he's smarter than chat. So he's kind of like the Trump of streamers in a way, where he blames chat if anything bad happens and doesn't take responsibility for it himself because he trusts chat and asks them questions when he doesn't know the answer. And if something goes right, he says, oh, look what I did. I'm so smart. I'm such a good player. If anything goes wrong, look what they caused me to do. It's all their fault. And this Dunning-Kruger locus of control is like very tightly related in that particular effect of what's happening to him. This cognitive bias that's going on there in your ability to flow between the internal external locus of control when it suits you versus when it doesn't. So I don't agree that like people have one or the other of these things. It's they might in certain areas of their life, like in religion, sure, maybe like they allow their church to control them. You're not someone that's going to organize an activity for the church versus you are someone that's on the board or the committee that plans things for everyone at the church to do. Then you're like actually responsible for other people as well. And again, this is important to think about in terms of how you're controlling society versus even just controlling yourself. And what's interesting though is that society controls you. So if you're taking it upon yourself to control yourself, then it follows that you have to first control society. If society has an influence on you, you have to then control society to fully control yourself as well. So I think some of the narcissistic Trump tendencies come from that psychology of attempting to control society in order to control oneself. These cognitive biases or like cognitive dissonances that people have, this freedom of speech thing is really interesting. The Pavel Durov, the creator of Telegram and somewhat VK with his brother, the Facebook of Russia, they talk a lot about freedom of speech, and they've shut down Telegram groups because there was violent speech or plans for violence in the countries, political violence. And a lot of times he says, the leaders of countries will like him for what he's doing in, some part of the world. And then when he does the same thing in their country, they don't like him and they try to censor him or they try to shut him down, like put up VPNs so people can't access Telegram's secret chats and allow end-to-end encryption and stuff like this. And it's very interesting how there are people that cannot realize that they're doing that I've met more women that do this than men in my life for some reason. And I don't know if that's because their hormones shift so much. Like maybe during some part of the month they're feeling more in tune with a certain kind of locus of control versus another part of the month. And men have cycles too. It's just like not as frequent. They don't flip-flop as much. But like provably, like they did this test on memory. Women who are on birth control, their memory works differently than when they're not on birth control. They remember, like you show them a video and ask them what they remember, and they remember emotional events that caused fear and stuff more when they're on birth control versus factual events more when they were, that didn't necessarily cause emotion, more when they're not on birth control. Or it might have been vice versa. I actually don't remember. I should relook. That was like 10 years ago I looked this up. I was looking up like suicide prevention and why people who have taken birth control like younger than 16 are so much more likely to kill themselves later in life, and how dangerous birth control can be with that metric in mind, and why is it correlated? Does correlation imply causation and all that stuff? Um, yeah, I don't know how to conclude all these thoughts, but I do think that I should meditate on this. The voting system that I've created on Reddit so that I can re-rank things gives people a certain amount of control that I think is positive, so that instead of the social media companies controlling what we believe and what our political affiliation is and what content we're seeing, we're more in control of that, and we can control the ranking algorithm ourselves to say like, this is the template I want to follow. So I could create a template, call it the strong template, and other people could choose to follow this template that weights IQ a certain amount, weights reading comprehension and critical thinking. You know, your SAT score, they don't have SAT everywhere in the world though. So we want some kind of international metric or like a test that you have to take in the system. And then when you're voting on everything, your votes are ranked based on your test, and you can only take this test once a month or something like this. I think that would be really impactful to giving people control and allowing them to exert their control appropriately on others. Like, I don't want to pretend to be an expert when I'm not. Like, I'm aware of Dunning-Kruger existing, right? So I'm aware that sometimes I think I'm knowledgeable about something that I'm actually not knowledgeable about. And I wouldn't want to have my upvotes on content on Reddit or my words that are trying to tell people to, you know, my advice, my encouragement for people to take certain paths through the forest that might be actually causing them harm because I'm giving them the wrong path. Whereas if I was this guy who was rightfully self-percepting of his knowledge and experience, gave them advice as well, you know, someone who's really dumb and knows nothing takes advice from this person or this person. They both sound equally as confident. Who do I know who to trust? They look like they're the same exact person. They sound exactly the same in terms of their speaking patterns, and I can't differentiate. But if they took a standardized test and had a weighting on their advice, then I'd be like, oh, this person performed better on the test, therefore, you know, I'm taking their advice. And people will be more likely to be successful in life because of that. Anyways, giving this locus of control, in what areas of our life are we giving up this control? We give up so much control when we're just on the internet. They fingerprint you, they know who you are anywhere you go. If you do a search for something on Google, then you go to any other site that's using the Google AdSense, you know, they can market you ads based on what you searched on. They know who you are. You try to create an incognito browser, they still know who you are. It's kind of a joke. I mean, they pretend not to. They don't use some of the variables that they would have otherwise, but you know, they have your IP address that you're accessing from. They know the rate at which you type, the rate at which you change tabs, the rate at which you move your mouse. Like all these variables can be collected and can be associated with you like a fingerprint. And they know who you are. Uh, this isn't really control that you can take away from them. Um, so when I ask Reddit for 30 posts, they're going to use their own ranking system to give me 30. And I can say, give me 30 more, give me 30 more, give me 30 more. Even when I say give me 3,000, there's probably still hundreds of thousands of posts that, you know, on the home feed that I could have been served. So even this is not like a pure system because I'm not able to give them my template and say, hey, weight everyone's upvotes with this template. They're going to weight it however they want to. They're going to serve me promoted content however they want to. If I have this system that gets rid of promoted content, just like I have, they just tried to serve me an ad there and it just got removed. And my system went and said, hey, there's this other thread that you would be more interested in for whatever reason. Even though it has 0 upvotes, this is something that I apparently, maybe somebody upvoted it that I liked and somebody downvoted it that I didn't like or whatever. It had low IQ, and so somehow this is good in this sub community that I'm in, Path of Exile. I think having this control as much as we can is important. And eventually we'll be able to give this template to Reddit and say, hey, use my ranking system, not your own, to give me content. I want to have this independent IQ measurement, or, has someone served in the military? If I was in, talking about this whole Israel thing, there's so many debates where it's like, okay, an Israel sniper rifle shot someone 6 years old that was not wearing an explosive vest or anything like that. So why aren't they being charged with murder? And the other person can say, oh, well, he has PTSD from when his friend was killed by a 6-year-old wearing an explosive vest. And so it's not really his fault. He can't be charged with murder because, war is a complex thing, and, we need to forgive him because he is suffering from PTSD from previously when there was this other 6-year-old. And it's like, okay, well, maybe he shouldn't be the one holding a rifle if he is suffering from PTSD. And so who do we charge? Maybe his commanding officer that deployed him. There should be some accountability for the murder of children, for the genocide that's happening in Palestine right now. I don't know, it's complex. Very complex. Where do we give control? How do we have accountability? I do hold Reddit accountable for serving me content where everyone's upvoting is equally ranked. If they only showed me the top ranked stuff based on sheer number of upvotes, which is not what they do, right? Which is good. So they have a hidden ranking system. They just don't expose what that is to us, and they don't allow us to control that ranking system. So they're holding on to that locus of control. They're taking that responsibility for me. And Mark Zuckerberg believes he's trying to do good in the world, and he's acknowledged the problems that Facebook had with rage baiting and causing people to hate each other more than love each other just because their algorithm promotes content that's divisive and inciting emotional responses because it causes you to stay on the platform longer. And that's what they were optimizing for. And that's a problem. Maybe that's not what they should be optimizing for. So he acknowledges that problem, and he thinks that he should be the one with that locus of control to try to fix the problem. But I think that users should just be able to choose their own templates and be able to choose their own echo chambers and be aware of what echo chambers they're in and be able to change them at will whenever they want to, instead of having it stuck in an algorithm on a company system somewhere in the background. All right, I've talked enough about this. I'm done yapping. I'm going to get back to work now.